Imagine the pre-dawn stillness over the Caribbean. The date is the January 3rd, 2026. At precisely 2:01 a.m., the silence shatters. American helicopters, black against the bruised sky, touch down in the heart of Caracas. It is not an invasion in the classic sense. It is a surgical, breathtakingly audacious seizure. Within 30 minutes, President Nicolas Maduro is in custody. And in that half hour, the effective control of $17.3 trillion worth of oil, Venezuela, vast untapped reserves, changes hands. Now, the official story will speak of democracy, of stability, of liberating a people. But look closer. This isn't about Venezuela. This is the next inevitable move in a game far older than any nation, a game of imperial survival. It is a single, glaring symptom of a disease that has consumed every dominant power for over 2,000 years. A disease with a predictable, feverish progression. Right now, the patient, the American-led financial system, is running a temperature. The debt stands at a staggering $38.5 trillion, swelling by £6 billion every single day. The interest bill alone has just crossed the £1 trillion mark annually. And quietly, subtly, the smart money is fleeing. Last year, 142,000 millionaires physically relocated their lives and capital, the largest voluntary wealth migration in recorded history. These are not coincidences. They are vital signs, blinking red on the monitor. The raid on Caracas isn't the beginning of a story. It is a desperate paragraph in the final chapters of a very old book. The plot is pre-written. The ending is known. The only question left is what role you will play when the final page turns. So let us close that modern ledger and open the ancient dog-eared textbook. Across 2 millennia, through the dust of fallen capitals, from Rome to Constantinople, from Amsterdam to London, a relentless, repeating pattern emerges. It is not about flags or languages, but about the brutal physics of money, power, and trust. Every empire, without exception, marches through 7 distinct stages on its road to ruin. It starts, always, with sound money, real value, gold, silver, something tangible you can hold in your palm. This hard foundation attracts trade, fuels genuine innovation, and builds a society rich from actual production. Then comes the expansion. The welfare state, the grand infrastructure, the social promise, all initially paid for by that hard-won wealth. Life gets better. But the seed of decline is sown here, in the subtle shift from investing in production to subsidizing consumption. Stage 3 is the great debasement. The bills from expansion and relentless military overstretch come due. Taxes cannot cover it. So the state commits the cardinal sin. It secretly steals value from everyone's pocket. In Rome, they shave the silver from coins. Today, they print digital money with a keystroke. The effect is identical, a silent, creeping erosion of purchasing power. This leads directly to the 4th, volatile stage, desperate resource acquisition. When your paper promise is fraying, you must seize real things, oil, minerals, land, to back it up. You trade diplomacy for force, economics for extraction. This is where we find our helicopters in Caracas, but it is a temporary bloody plaster on a gushing wound. For after this comes the loss of confidence, the fiscal dominance where debt controls the state, and finally, the collapse and reset. The wealth of generations evaporates from paper and rematerializes in hard assets. This is the cycle. This is the trap. And its gears are now turning with a familiar, terrifying rhythm. Let us witness the prototype. The Roman Empire was not built in a day, and its fall was not a sudden tumble but a slow, sickening slide down these 7 stages. At its peak, the silver denarius was the dollar of the ancient world, trusted from Britannia to Babylon. It was sound money, the engine of a vast, thriving commercial network. Then came the expansion, the aqueducts, the roads, the annona grain dole for the citizens of Rome. The state's promises grew faster than its productive economy, and then the eternal military burden, legions on every frontier, each a bottomless pit of expense. The treasury was bled white, so in the mint's shadowy vaults, the fatal compromise began. Emperor Nero, facing a cash crunch after the Great Fire of Rome, initiated the Great Debasement. He ordered the silver content of the denarius reduced, mixing in common base metals. It was a hidden tax, a theft so clever most never felt the knife. But with each successive crisis, barbarian incursions, civil wars, plague, the emperors returned to the same desperate remedy. More base metal, less silver. By the crisis-riddled 3rd century, the coin was a pathetic bronze ghost, dipped in a mere wash of silver. The predictable, devastating consequence? Inflation. Catastrophic empire-wide price rises. A measure of wheat that cost 8 denarii in the 2nd century cost 120,000 by the time of Diocletian. The state, in a panic, tried to command reality itself with edict on maximum prices, threatening execution for anyone who charged more. It was a farce. The economy retreated into barter. Soldiers, paid in worthless coin, became loyal only to whoever could plunder real treasure for them. The Roman state had entered fiscal dominance, its entire existence bent to servicing its own monstrous militarized bureaucracy with devalued scrip. The final wealth transfer was absolute. The senatorial aristocracy who saw the writing on the wall converted their wealth into vast, fortified country estates, latifundia, becoming self-sufficient warlords. The common citizen, the soldier, the pensioner holding the old promises, was left with a purse full of useless metal. The Western Empire didn't fall to the Goths and Vandals, it hollowed out from within first, collapsing onto a rotten financial core. He barbarians merely walked through the door left hanging off its hinges. Centuries later, in the damp, prosperous Low Countries, the cycle played out again with modern flourishes. The 17th century Dutch Republic was not an empire of land, but of finance and trade. The guilder, backed by the immense wealth of the Dutch East India Company, became the world's first true reserve currency. Amsterdam was the Wall Street of its age. This was the Golden Age, sound money creating unimaginable wealth from global commerce. Then, expansion. The Republic built not just canals but a vast welfare system for its poor, alongside a globe-spanning navy to protect its trade routes. The costs ballooned. Rivalry with England turned into endless, ruinously expensive naval wars. To pay for it, the Dutch pioneered something new: the sovereign debt bond. They borrowed against their future, amassing huge public debts. This was a more sophisticated abasement, not of the coin's metal but of the state's balance sheet. The first tremors of lost confidence appeared in the infamous tulip mania. It was more than a silly bubble, it was a symptom of excess capital sloshing around a financial system beginning to detach from real productivity. The smart money grew nervous. Then came the Fourth Anglo-to-Dutch War in 1780. The British, a rising power, deliberately targeted Dutch financial hegemony, seizing their global assets and trade flows. It was a calculated strike against the system's core. Credit evaporated overnight. The cascading defaults bankrupted the state. The guilder's value and its reserve status imploded. The wealth that had been stored in Dutch credit and bonds, the paper promises of the world's bank, vanished. It transferred abruptly to London, and to those who had shifted their assets into tangible commodities, or the debt of the ascendant British Empire. The Dutch lesson was stark. Even the most advanced financial system, the very architect of modern capitalism, is not immune to the ancient cycle of trust, overextension, and catastrophic reset. Our final historical witness is the most instructive, for its decline was in slow motion. The British Empire reached its zenith on the gold-backed pound sterling. Bretton Woods in 1944 was merely the formal funeral. The patient had been ailing for decades. Britain's expansion in the 19th century, the social reforms, the global navy, was funded by industrial supremacy. But by the 20th century, the costs of 2 world wars and maintaining the empire left it drowning in debt, primarily to its own offspring, America. The debasement here was a managed retreat, the painful abandonment of the gold standard in 1931, a strategic devaluation. The loss of confidence phase was prolonged and genteel, masked by political clout. Britain enforced the sterling area, compelling its former colonies to hold pounds and trade in them, artificially propping up demand. It was a financial empire living on borrowed time and borrowed credibility. The pivotal moment, The Caracas moment for the pound was the Suez Crisis of 1956. When Britain, France, and Israel invaded Egypt, the United States, the new banker, froze British assets and refused to support the pound. Overnight, Westminster learned a brutal lesson. Geopolitical power now followed financial dependency. The run on sterling that followed was a direct result of this lost confidence. The following decades were a managed fiscal dominance, with successive governments trapped between defending the pound's value and stimulating a stagnant economy. Devaluation followed devaluation. Each time, the message was clearer, the promise was weakening. The wealth transfer was less dramatic but more comprehensive. Savers and pension funds tied to sterling assets saw their purchasing power slowly erode over a generation. Those who understood the pattern, who diversified into dollar assets, gold, or global equities, preserved their wealth. Britain did not collapse in a revolution. It underwent a genteel, decades-long wealth transfer from the holders of the old imperial currency to the holders of the new. The empire faded, but the lesson was etched in stone. Reserve currency status is not a permanent crown. It is a lease, and the rent is fiscal discipline. When the rent goes unpaid, the eviction is inevitable. The American century now stands in the harsh light of this ancient pattern. Its stage one was the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, a moment of extraordinary clarity. The dollar, pegged to gold at $35 an ounce, became the world's bedrock. America, holding the lion's share of the world's gold, offered not just its military might but a monetary promise as solid as the metal in Fort Knox. This sound foundation fueled an unprecedented boom, a genuine golden age of production and innovation. Stage 2, the expansion, was the great American dream made manifest. The interstate highways, the GI Bill, the rise of suburbia, and later, the Great Society programs of Medicare and Medicaid. A vast, prosperous middle class was built, funded by the immense productive engine of a nation that made the world's cars, steel, and electronics. But the shadows were lengthening. The costs of the Cold War, the quagmire in Vietnam, and the promise of global policing strained the treasury. By the late 1960s, foreign governments, notably France, began to do the unthinkable. They lined up to exchange their paper dollars for America's gold. The trust was cracking. So, on a summer weekend in 1971, President Nixon delivered the shock. He slammed shut the gold window. The dollar was cut loose from any tangible anchor, becoming a pure fiat currency, a promise backed only by faith and force. This was the great American debasement, the pivot into stage 3. The immediate aftermath was the stagflation of the 1970s, a direct consequence. But collapse was postponed by a masterstroke of financial statecraft, the petrodollar. In a secret deal with Saudi Arabia, the US guaranteed security in exchange for oil being priced and traded exclusively in dollars. Suddenly, every nation needed dollars to power their economies. This artificial demand created a 50-year reprieve, a global system where American deficits were recycled into a seemingly endless demand for its debt. It was a temporary fix of genius, but a fix nonetheless, and it led us inevitably to stage 4. When your currency's strength relies on a geopolitical arrangement, you must fiercely, ruthlessly protect that arrangement. The military posture shifts from defense to securing the lifelines of the system itself. The landscapes of Iraq and Libya tell that story. And so the hypothetical raid on Caracas is not a bizarre outlier. It is the logical, desperate next page in this playbook. It is the behavior of an empire that can no longer rely solely on the allure of its money, and must instead seize the physical stuff that money is meant to represent. We are now in the foothills of the most treacherous stages. Stage 5, the loss of confidence, is not a headline, it is a quiet, persistent drip. It is the Chinese and Indian millionaires relocating to Dubai and Singapore, moving not just their families but their capital. It is the 142,000 high-net-worth individuals who voted with their feet last year, the largest such migration ever recorded. It is the central banks of Russia, China, and even cautious nations in the Gulf, slowly, instantly diversifying their reserves away from an overconcentration of dollars. It is the quiet agreements between trading partners to bypass the dollar entirely. This isn't a stampede, it is a careful, calculated retreat from the edges of a room that feels increasingly unstable. Meanwhile, the domestic social contract, the glue of stage 2, is fraying. Inflation is no longer a statistic but a palpable reality at the supermarket and the energy bill. Wages chase prices but never quite catch up. The political centre fragments, pulled apart by extremes, as a society begins the bitter process of assigning blame for a diminishing pie. And hovering over it all is the spectre of stage 6, fiscal dominance. The numbers are now so large they defy comprehension. A national debt ticking upward by millions every minute. An annual interest bill that has just crossed the £1 trillion mark, a sum that eclipses the entire military budget. This is the trap. The Federal Reserve is caught in a vice. If it raises interest rates to combat the inflation of stage 5, it makes the servicing of that monstrous debt unbearable, risking a fiscal crisis. If it keeps rates low to manage the debt, it pours petrol on the inflationary fire, destroying the currency's purchasing power. The state's finances begin to dictate monetary policy, not the other way around. This is what former officials now whisper about in warnings. The system is losing its room to maneuver, its ability to respond to crisis. The gears are beginning to grind against each other. Stage 7 is where the cycle concludes, always and everywhere, with a final, violent reset. It presents two grim doors: hyperinflation or sovereign default. In hyperinflation, the printing presses run not to stimulate, but in a panic to meet basic obligations, until the currency becomes literal wallpaper. A chilling joke like the Weimar Republic's marks or Zimbabwe's trillion-dollar notes. In a default, the state openly reneges on its promises, tearing up the social and financial contract. Often, it is a grotesque mixture of both. This is not the end of the world, but it is the end of a world, the specific financial world built during the empire's reign. And within this cataclysm occurs the great silent transfer. Wealth does not vanish, it changes hands. It moves from the form that was trusted in the old system to the form that will be needed in the new. Every historical precedent screams the same truth. When Rome fell, the aristocracy held land, not coins. When the continental currency collapsed after the American Revolution, those who held physical goods and property survived. When the Argentine peso has repeatedly failed, those with dollars under the mattress or skills to trade endured. The wealth stored in digital bank balances, in government bonds, in pensions tied to a dying currency, it evaporates, a mirage disappearing in the heat of crisis. Simultaneously, the value of tangible, essential assets, productive land, precious metals, energy resources, and crucially indispensable knowledge and trade skills, soars in relative terms. The plumber, the farmer, the doctor, the engineer, they retain agency. The retiree living on a fixed pension denominated in the collapsing unit does not. This is the brutal arithmetic heart of the wealth transfer. It is not fair, it is not kind, it is simply the gravitational pull of a system in its final collapse, rewarding real things and punishing abstract promises. Faced with this historical parade of fallen giants, the modern mind rebels. It throws up defenses, powerful-sounding incantations to ward off the old pattern. Let us dismantle them. First, our technology will save us. Rome had concrete and aqueducts that defied their age. Britain harnessed steam and industry. Technology boosts productivity, yes, but it does not repeal the laws of mathematics. When a government spends 6% more than its entire economy produces every single year, no app, no AI, can bridge that chasm in perpetuity. The deficit is a claim on real resources, and you cannot download those. Second, the dollar's reserve status makes us immune. This is the most seductive and dangerous myth. The Dutch guilder and the British pound were once considered just as unassailable. Reserve status is not a magical shield. It is a temporary advantage that allows for greater excess, building a taller tower of debt. Its loss is not the cause of the fall, but the final confirming symptom of it. Third, we can just print more money. This is the ultimate confession that the pattern is underway. Yes, a sovereign government can create unlimited currency, but doing so to pay debts is the very definition of hyperinflation, choosing the collapse by inflation door. It is not an escape from stage 7, it is a direct route to it. The argument this time is different. is the eternal siren song at the edge of the historical cycle. It has been sung before, in every capital, in every dying age. And history's reply is a deafening, consistent silence. Understanding the cycle is not about predicting a precise date for doomsday. It is about recognizing the season. We are in late autumn. The wise response is not panic, but prudent preparation. History provides the guide. First, diversify sovereignty. Do not hold all your wealth, your assets, or your legal residence within a single, straining political jurisdiction. The millionaires leaving are the canaries in the coal mine. They seek optionality. Second, own real things. Allocate a portion of your wealth outside the financial system itself into physical assets that have no counterparty risk. Land with a purpose, precious metals, even stored essentials hold value when digits on a screen blur into nothingness. Third, become indispensable. Cultivate a skill that people need in any weather, the ability to heal, to build, to fix, to grow. This is the ultimate human capital, the one asset you carry with you that cannot be devalued by a central bank. Fourth, hold liquidity in the right forms. While fleeing the system entirely is impossible, you can hold liquidity in stronger vessels, a mix of currencies from creditor nations, or assets that benefit from the very chaos the system creates. This is not about betting against your country. It is about rationally insulating your family's future from forces far larger than any one nation can now control. It is the application of historical wisdom, not fear. The raid on Caracas, real or hypothetical, is a flare in the night sky. It signals a shift from persuasion to coercion, from economic dominance to resource seizure. This is what empires do when the confidence game gets hard. The pattern is not a conspiracy, it is a consequence of promises made exceeding the means to keep them, repeated across centuries. The coming decade will not be a linear decline, but a series of lurches, a banking crisis here, a currency panic there, another desperate geopolitical grab, each one rationalized away, each one a further step down the well-worn staircase. Your task is not to wait for the final crash, but to read the weather. The data points are all around you, in the debt clocks, in the migration figures, in the quiet strategic moves of other nations. This is the great unveiling. As the old saying goes, only when the tide goes out do you discover who has been swimming naked. The empire cycle is the tide. It is now receding. The choices made now, in these seemingly stable moments, will determine whether you are left exposed or securely anchored when the waters finally pull back to reveal the new, uncharted landscape beneath. The pattern is absolute. The transfer is coming. See it or be part of it.